Continuing with the next video over here, we're dealing with sensors. Now, to understand sensors are always inputs to the computer, telling it, giving it the present information of what's going on, the air coming in, the temperature coming in, how much you're stepping on the gas pedal, in order to control the air-fuel ratio to give you the most power out of your engine that you can under all conditions. If you're going up a mountain, you're pulling a load, right? First gear, second gear, whatever it is, you have to have the most power that you need. If you're cruising on the highway, taking a trip to Florida with your family, you want to be coasting. Third gear, fourth gear, whatever it is, computer will control it. The computer has to know everything. Now, we spoke about, and that's why I started the other one with the powertrain control module. The main, he's the boss, the main computer board. Now, there's one part, remember we talked about dotted lines, one part of the control module, another part of the control module. This is B+. The top of the schematic usually is the 12 volts. That's why I always start at the top, the 12 volt line. The bottom is usually the grounds. You're going from the top, the battery voltage, and to ground. So you're seeing the complete path of current, how it flows. So we learned a little from the previous video. We learned a little how to analyze diagrams and understand diagrams. But let's develop on that. Let's improve on that. I'm going to give you the right away the ideas. Sensors. We just spoke about intake air temperature sensor. It gives the computer the information, the temperature of the air entering the air intake system, and eventually, obviously, the engine. Now, obviously, if you close the hood, you're trapping the air, so it's going to be more hotter. Temperature is going to go up. Now, and of course, on a hotter day in Florida, the temperature is going to be hot. So the intake temperature is going to be hot. Now, the computer has its conditions. It gives us certain conditions that we have to obey for him to respond. What do I mean by that? We give the computer, as you saw in the previous video, and that's why I started the other one, how much does the computer get? The computer gets in the run position or the start with 12 volts from the battery. Beautiful, great. Now, based upon that, we have sensors. This is the symbol for a sensor, intake air temperature sensor. The fact that there's a little arrow in it shows that it's not a set value of resistance. It changes. It's always changing. With what? With the temperature of the air. The connection, how many wires do we have? We have one wire going to this PCM on pin 25 connected C2, which is a tan wire. We have another wire, and this is terminal B over here, a terminal A over here, or connector A. We have another wire, which is a black wire, going to the other part of the PCM at pin 57, giving it a low reference, giving it a ground. So both wires basically are going to the PCM, but at different pin numbers, right? 57, and this one is pin 25. Now, remember, this has 2 pins. There are sensors with 3 pins, but let's first see what's going on here. Here's another one, throttle position sensor. When you're stepping on that gas pedal, what are you doing? You're opening up something called a plate in order for air to enter into the engine. 3 pins are associated with that. The throttle plate, the angle of it, and as much as you open it, wide open throttle or just acceleration or deacceleration, that plate will be in a different position every single time according to how much you step on the gas pedal. This over here is, and this is why I had to start with this point. The computer, we gave it 12 volts. How much do you think the computer gives us back? He gives, from the 12 volts that we gave him, he gives us back only 5 volts. He kept 7 volts for himself. It's like I give you $12. It's like you give me $12. and I give you back only $5, and I keep the $7 for myself. How selfish of myself, right? This is what the computer's doing, being selfish. We gave him 12 volts, and he's only giving us 5 volts. But he's giving us 2 conditions. I'm going to give you 5 volts on the condition that what? You cannot go higher than 5 volts. You can't go 6 volts on this sensor. You can't go 7 volts, 8 volts. No. That's condition number 1. All I'm giving you is 5 volts, and that's all you have to deal with. Condition number 1. Condition number 2. Even though I'm going to give you the 5 volts, you have to still give me a feedback signal. Tell me what's going on. So this is my reference. They call 5 volts the reference. But you also have to tell me what the air temperature is. And how will I know? This voltage will drop. This resistance will drop. Negative coefficient sensor, resistor, its resistance is high when it's cold. When it gets hot, its resistance goes down, goes down, goes down, goes down. As I made a video about this, please go see my video on Joe Electronic Schematics for Auto, how to test mass airflow sensor, how to test intake air temperature sensor with a multimeter. Anyway, the voltage will drop too. So we start off with 5 volts. You could go down to 3 volts, to 2 volts, 1 volt, whatever it is, based on temperature. Hotter the temperature, the less the voltage will get. The computer needs that input to know the temperature of the air. So he's giving us 5 volts, being selfish. We gave him 12 volts. And in addition to that, he still wants to know all the information from this sensor that he gave us. Boy, now, how do I know this is 5 volts? We have a map sensor over here, also 5 volt reference. We also over here have an engine coolant temperature sensor. I told you, it tells you the temperature of the coolant temperature in the engine. Also 5 volts. Not only that, a throttle position sensor that we're talking about, also 5 volts. All of these are 5 volts. How do I know these are 5 volts? I'll give you a hint. It says 5 volts here, it says 5 volts over here. But these are 5 volts and this is 5 volts. How did I know that? It doesn't say 5 volt reference. How did I come to that conclusion? Let's start again. We gave it 12 volts. He kept 7 volts for himself. Right? You see a resistor here? 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 This resistor took the 7 volts. A voltage drop resistor, they call it. So from the 12 volts, it took 7 volts and only gave 5 volts. We see a resistor here. That means also it dropped 7 volts. It gave us 5 volts in return. Same principle here. Same principle over here. All going to 12 volts. The drop down resistor, we're left with 5 volts to all of these. That's how you know. Whenever you see a resistor, you know you're getting 5 volts in return. But where's this resistor? Is it outside? Can I find it outside? No. You see it? You see where it is inside the dotted lines? That means it's inside the PCM. We cannot see it. But this diagram, this dealership schematic that they used to work for, this is inside, tells you that there is a resistor inside, and it's dropping the voltage from 12 volts to 5 volts. That's number 1. Number 2, so now we understand more clearer, hopefully. A throttle position sensor. How many wires? Let's look. 1 wire to low reference, 1 wire to the 5 volt reference to get 5 volts, another wire, signal over here. Oops. Oh, right here to pin 24. So this one, the wiper, the middle one goes to pin 24 of the same computer as that one. This one goes to pin 60. The black wire. This is dark blue wire. This is terminal B. This is terminal C. Connection C. Connection B. This is a connector C2, and this goes to this. This gives this a ground. Low reference means like it's giving it a ground. We need 5 volts. He's giving us that because he was selfish to keep the other 7 volts for himself. So he's giving us 5 volts and he's giving us a ground. That's nice of him. But in return, he wants also that we should give him a feedback line. You see this? Sensor signal. We should give him a signal of how much we're stepping on the throttle, on the gas pedal, to open up the throttle plate so that he knows how much air is going in, so he can control the fuel with that air that's coming in. So 3 wires for this one. Whenever you move on that throttle position sensor, you're moving this wiper, this connector, up or down. What do I mean by that? If you're going up, you're going closer to 5 volts. The most that you could go is 5 volts. You can't go to 6 volts, 7 volts, 8 volts. You could go up to 5 volts over here. As you saw over here, this is connected to A. If you're going down here, the other direction, you're going down to 0 volts, which is ground that he gave us. So you're going from 5 volts the most to 0 volts. You could be at 2.5 volts. You could be at 3 volts, 4 volts, 5 volts. You can't be at 6 volts, 7 volts. Nope, you can't be. And you can't be at -0, -2, -3. Nope. 3 wires associated with throttle position sensor. 2 wires associated with intake air temperature sensor. 3 wires. How many wires with this? After we did that exercise, can you go over map sensor? Tells us how much vacuum, how much load we have on the engine. Isn't it similar to this one? It sure is. How much voltage do we have over here? If you said 12 volts, you're wrong. Your response should be 5 volts. Why? Because it says 5 volts. Number 2, we have a resistor internal. We drop voltage. That's the second reason. 5 volts over here goes through what color wire? A gray wire. What's the gauge of that wire? 0.35. 5 volts over here. Where do you think this goes on before I even move the camera so you can see where it goes to? Your answer should be a ground. Here it is, low reference. Pin 54, a ground. Given by what? The PCM. He gives us the 5 volts. He gives us the ground. In return, he's asking for us to give him a sensor signal. We give him back the signal, how much vacuum, how much load there is in the engine. That's a sensor, input sensor to him. Okay? Let's go back to one more. If you understood those 3, this should be easy to figure out. Number 1, engine coolant temperature sensor, abbreviated ECT. What's the first thing? How much voltage we get? Do we have 12 volts or 5 volts from the computer? If you said 12 volts, go back and go over what we learned before. If you said 5 volts, you are correct. Why 5 volts? Why not 12 volts? Well, there's a resistor here. That means we're dropping voltage. Very good if you said that. What 2 wires connect us to the computer? What's your response? Your response should be a yellow wire to which pin of the PCM? Pin number what? 74. What connector? C1. What gauge of wire? 0.8 yellow. Going to this terminal B of this engine coolant temperature sensor. And where's the other wire? If you have a wire going to a positive voltage, the other wire has to go to. If you said ground, you're correct. Is it a physical ground? This? No. Where do you get this ground from? This low reference. The computer gives it. That should be your response. What kind of wire is it? What color? Black. What pin of the PCM? Pin 80. And the connector C1. Gauge 0.8. Now, we went from a yellow wire to a black wire. Now, he gives us 5 volts again. The same thing, give it 5 volts, and this will drop also. What's the difference between here and here? You should remember we spoke about this symbol. This is not a fixed symbol of resistance. What's the highest voltage that this can go up to? This temperature, this sensor. If you said 12 volts, you're wrong. Why? He's only giving us 5 volts. How can it go up to 12 volts? The most it could go up to is 5 volts. So, number 2, very important. When you see 5 volts, I once saw a video and he said the voltage can increase. Absolutely impossible. It doesn't even make sense to say that. If I give you 5 volts, if I give you $5 in your pocket, can you have $6? Can you have $7? Can you have $8? Impossible. I only gave you $5. So what will happen? You can only go less. Why? Because you will spend that $5. So you'll have less money, less money, less money. You can only go down in value. Same thing over here. If we give him 5 volts, he can only go down. That's a common sense thing of electronics. When he said you can have more than 5 volts, I almost shook my head. Are you kidding me? And you're making a video? on automotive. Are you kidding me? So now 5 volts here, this could go down to 2 volts. It could go down 3 volts, 1 volt, as much as the coolant temperature is. Remember, coolant temperature could be 210 degrees on your gauge, could be 250, whatever it is. Could be at startup, it's cold. At open loop, something called open loop, when the computer is not paying attention to the oxygen sensors, it's only paying attention to these sensors that I just mentioned over here, the temperature is cold. Therefore, what happens? Therefore, the computer recognizes it's cold. On a cold winter day in January, it says, I got to put a lot of fuel into the cylinders of that engine. Why? To warm it up faster. Then it goes into something called closed loop. Closed loop means when the oxygen sensors are hot enough, and then he uses them as the inputs. Right now, we're in open loop, just trying to get the engine warm. You're in school, you're coming to school, you're picking your kids up, right? And it's January, and it is cold outside. It is 10 degrees, right? You're idling, you're warming up the car in order to pick up your kids. So it'll be warm in the car for them, right? Of course, there are state laws now which says you're not allowed to idle. You're not allowed to idle for a long time. Well, don't they have kids that they have to pick up at school? I don't think they want their kids to be in a cold car when they pick them up, right? More nonsense from the government. Anyway, remember, 5 volts, it can only go down, it can't go up. 5 volts, it can only go down, it can't go up. 5 volts for intake air temperature, it can only go down, it can't go up. I hope this was helpful. Please go to my channel. If you give me a like, hopefully. Automotive Electronic Schematics by Joseph, please. I'm working on that channel now, trying to get that views up. I was monetized for the other one. Thank you so much. Congratulations. Thank you so much for your support for that channel. Joe Electronic Schematics for Auto. You go to the hands-on. We just discussed this, but go to the hands-on to see how I measured intake air temperature with the multimeter, a mass airflow sensor with the scope. I'll go over it again hands-on, and you'll understand it. If you understood this, you have graduated to a higher level in electronics. Believe me, if you understood this video. Thank you for watching.